everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Christine. I am with A Naturally Balanced Dog, and tonight we are going to be doing part two of our series, I guess, which is about what foods are best during the spring to feed your dog. This is based on seasonality. And it's based on traditional Chinese medicine. So if you're not familiar with traditional Chinese medicine, it's a little bit of a different theory than a lot of people might understand, particularly in fresh food world. So hopefully you get a chance to see part one, because that will give you a better understanding as to what it is that we're doing here tonight. What we're doing is creating some recipes based on part one. And so I just kind of want to put out there, the nice thing about this is really, irregardless of what foods you feed your dog, this can actually, I think, fall into different categories. So on my channel here, primarily I focus on helping people with fresh food for their dogs. And so as I mentioned, it kind of falls along into some different areas. So whether you're a kibble feeder and or you do a prey module, or like me, I am barf module, and or maybe you're doing an 80-10-10 and adding to the mix. So you can utilize this in any of those categories. However, you're going to kind of pick and choose based on what it is that you particularly follow. So, spring foods, and again, if you go back and watch the first video, spring foods are based on the wood element, and the wood element is the season of spring. The season of spring starts on March 21st through June 1st, and its taste is sour. And so when we're putting together recipes that are based on nourishing the liver and the gallbladder, it tends to follow foods that are energetically uplifting, which is kind of what the spring is. And so if you think about spring in itself, we look outside, the grass is growing, you see flowers sprouting up, you see more activities, birds, and, we're out, we're starting to come out of winter into spring, and we're becoming more active. And so again, spring is about upward movement and outward. And so to help dogs manage just like we do. So for example, we're coming out of winter, and the foods that we generally eat in the winter are a little bit heavier. They're more like stews and soups and root vegetables, as opposed to, as we come into spring, we eat and tend to eat lighter and more leafy greens, salads, more fruits. We tend to eat a little bit less. And so we'll be able to kind of take the theory of traditional Chinese medicine and apply it to seasonal feeding, which again, we're in the spring. So if you haven't had a chance to see the first video, I put that in the, below, and so you can go click on that and watch that video, because it's got a lot of great information as to understanding the theory a little bit more. And so I'm not going to rehash that, because that was on the first video. This video, we're talking about recipes. And so I didn't want to bring my computer into my kitchen. And so I brought my kitchen out to my office area. And so hopefully you can enjoy what we're going to be doing here. And so again, as I mentioned, I just want to mention that just really quick, that these meals that we're preparing are not balanced for those people who feed, you know, like the prey and or the barf and or any other form of food. It is not a balanced recipe. So what we're just doing is looking at the energetics of the food and how we would apply that. For me personally, what I would do is, as I prepare and or am I creating recipes that are based on seasonal, sometimes I take the traditional Chinese medicine, I apply it to my practice, which is working with dogs that might have some behavioral issues or emotional imbalances and or seasonal, and I can take the energetics and the food theory and apply it to them, and then put it through a formulator that helps me to take the recipe and then balance it out a little bit. But that's not what we're doing. If it is something of interest to you, I would probably recommend that you go onto the website at anaturallybalanceddog.com, and you'll be able to, let me hit that little button right there so you can, so sorry, hang on. Boop. There, so that you can find us. And so anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So as I said, the season is spring. The energy is upward and outward. It is more yang energy, which means it's hot. And so the proteins that you're going to be using in that is going to be things like chicken, duck, turkey, goat. Those are warming. And or you can use you know, the meat and the muscle. Along with that, you'll want to utilize you know, the organs, liver, heart, gizzards, kidneys, anything of that nature. Eggs, you would want to probably use either chicken eggs or duck eggs or turkey eggs. And so staying in that same realm. And then again, when it comes to the bones, you will, again, use the parts based on the proteins that are more warming. From a vegetable standpoint, we would be looking at things like, you know, your dark leafy greens, asparagus, sauerkraut, again, keeping in mind that the taste and or the flavor of spring, which is the wood element, is a sour taste. And so there are different herbs that you can use, which is like rosemary and thyme and garlic, you know, things of that nature, which will be beneficial. In this, leafy greens, as I mentioned, you got spinach, you can do dandelions, you could do, you know, kale, fermented foods. Fermented foods are great because it's got the pre and probiotics that are in there, which are additionally nutritionally beneficial. And then there are grains that can be used during this, which is brown rice, oats, barley. And so for those of you who don't agree with adding grains into your diet, don't. But from a Chinese traditional medicine standpoint, basically these foods have a warming effect. And so we're just going to kind of create those recipes. And so let's go ahead and get started. And so not only am I going to do some recipes that you can do for your dogs, but we're also going to, you know, maybe you don't do full raw and or, you know, maybe you just want to kind of test it out. But we're going to do some how to create some treats as well for your dog so that you can still utilize this theory for your dog. And again, going back to the first video as to understand the benefits and so forth. So one of the things that we talk about is we're looking to nourish the liver, and in order to do that, again, the taste is based on sour. Sometimes we notice that maybe the dog becomes too yang, meaning there's too much heat that is created. Sometimes I see that in behaviors and or emotional pieces. But again, here in the season, we would notice dogs that would be barking, maybe they're easily agitated, maybe they're moody. Those are usually dogs that are showing the signs that they're a little bit more on the yang side. And so if you have a dog that has that type of energy, then you can still utilize yang foods, but you can balance it out with neutrals. And so neutrals are going to be like your beef. And so that's what we're going to be working with today is some beef from a neutral. And as I'm going through this, I'll kind of explain a little bit more. And so the first thing that we're going to be looking at is taking turkey. 1 second. Got a little plate here just in case. And so one of the things that you can do is take chicken thigh and or a turkey thigh and or a beef thigh or turkey, quail, or duck. And so any of those will be okay. And so what I'm going to do is just make it as if I was making one of my dog's food. I generally kind of just cut the meat off. I leave the bone in. If you're feeding bones to your dogs, you want to make sure that the bones are always raw. And so raw is digestible as opposed to any kind of cook bones. So we want to make sure that we're always using raw. So along with that, we're going to be adding our organ meat. And so again, I tend to follow the BARF diet. And so that's going to be muscle meat, you're going to have organ meat, you're going to have bone, and you're going to have some vegetables and so forth. And so here what I have is some chicken liver and some gizzards that we have here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that. Oh, what I do? I was going to say what I do with my towel. And then we're going to have some asparagus. And asparagus, again, is based on a warming. And I should have brought a spoon, which I'm sorry. So I'm just going to have to kind of we're going to use some asparagus with the chicken liver. The other thing that we're going to add to this is sauerkraut. And again, the benefit of sauerkraut is it is a fermented food, like a fermented cabbage, but you could do fermented cabbage and or again, you can ferment your asparagus, but generally cabbage. And so the fermented cabbage, again, is good for the pre and the probiotics. And along with that, I'm going to add some maitake mushrooms. I particularly like the maitake mushrooms primarily because it is one of the mushrooms that is the highest source of vitamin D. And so I tend to use the maitake mushrooms quite a bit. I buy it online, usually dehydrate it, and then certainly you could just simply rehydrate your mushroom before you feed your dog. The other thing that I am going to be adding here is avocado. And so avocado, you know, a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, don't feed avocado, you're not supposed to feed that. But the reality is you can feed an avocado as long as it doesn't have the skins or the pits on it. So I'm primarily doing this because in my mind as I'm preparing these, I'm thinking about like what kind of things nutritionally I need to kind of cover for here. And so avocados are great vitamins for A, B6, vitamin E. I particularly like it because of the fat content, but it also has like potassium in it. So it's got some really good micronutrients that are in there. And then what I want to do here is I'm going to add some duck heart. So albeit duck heart is not considered an organ, but is actually considered a muscle. So as you're putting it together, but I think heart is always good to put into any of the recipes. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you have an array of different, eggs that you could be doing. So I've got some, duck eggs. We've got some chicken eggs. We've got some quail eggs. And so I am going to add egg into, I'm going to add egg. I'm going to do a couple quail eggs. And then the other thing that I am going to add here is going to be some thyme. And so thyme is again, all of these are based on energetically creating meals that are going to support our dogs during the spring. And so the benefits of those are going to be primarily a lot of the foods you might notice from the vegetables and so forth is they're very cleansing to the liver, which is going to be during this time of the season, which is spring, that is good to do a detox. And so we talked about that a couple of videos ago. So if you didn't see it, you might want to catch it. So we talked about how to cleanse the liver, doing a detox, and the benefits, health benefits to that. So basically, this is what a meal might look like. And so let me give you a view of that. And so this would be a perfect meal for the spring. Let's see, I'm not quite sure. A springtime meal for your dog. So again, it has some chicken thighs in there. And again, when you think of even your meats, how to make foods from the yang perspective. Even if you change the meat, for example, a thigh is dark meat, but the breast is a light meat, that will change the energetics of the food in itself. It's still yang, it's just based on that temperature. When we think of temperature, it's not necessarily the temperature in which the food is, but it's the temperature of the food and what that creates in the body and how that affects the body. So that's one meal that is a great springtime food. And again, if this was for mine, I would tell you it's probably missing some kelp in there. It's missing some fish oil in there. It's probably missing some zinc in there that I would probably have to balance that out nutritionally. And so that's the meal. But if I were to want to make a treat for my dogs that was yang, then that would be, let's see here. So what I did here, is some of the stuff I did is I pre-cooked the meals so that I obviously, as I said, I'm not in the kitchen, and so I am doing this here. I'm going to just wipe this off. Okay. And so if I were to make a treat that were for my dogs that were based on seasonality, then I would be, oops, wrong one, hang on. Turkey. So then what I'm doing here is I have like a little, these are treats, you know, like a Kong, but it's like a cup made by West Paw. And so I like these because you can kind of fit a lot of different types of stuff in there. And so what I'm doing is I pre-cooked some turkey meat that I am going to put in here. Again, turkey meat being warmer. And so it has the energy level of spring, again, moving upward and outward for energy. The other thing that I'm adding in here is some sweet potato, but what I have is some garlic along with, I mashed it with goat's milk. And so for those of you who buy garlic like I do and use garlic in your dog's diet, then I usually like to recommend and or kind of just give you a little heads up. When you're buying garlic, you want to buy the garlic that is a neutral color that has the roots still on it. You want to stay away from the garlic that has the roots cut off and it's really, really white. Those are usually come from China. And so we actually, right here in California, have the garlic capital of the world. And so you want to buy your garlic from California. Again, make sure that the root is still on it. Make sure it's a neutral color. Otherwise, it's been, you know, you know, they grow their, they don't, you know, they grow their food and sewage and waste and stuff like that. So not something that you want to do. So when you're looking for your garlic, you want to, again, try to find USA grown. The other thing, as I mentioned, I mashed it with the goat's milk. And so again, goat still has that warming effect. And so we're utilizing that. The other thing I'm going to do right here is an apple. And so you kind of want to find the apples. This is a Granny Smith, but you want to find apples that are actually sour, because remember the flavor for spring is sour. And so that is going to be something that is going to help, again, nourish the liver and the kidneys. And so we're just going to take these slices. I'm going to just jam them in there. And so again, this has some turkey in it, turkey along with the sweet potato. And then I am adding some sour apples, which is the Granny Smith. And then I'm just going to add herbs, because I do generally always add herbs to most of my meals. I think it is good for just finishing it off, which is just simply a little cinnamon on the top. Cinnamon is actually very cooling energetically, but I would take this now and freeze it. And so that would be a great little treat for your dog at some point in time. And again, then this way you're utilizing seasonal foods for your dog from a nutritional standpoint and energetic standpoint. And so again, if your dog is having too much or has too much yang, as I mentioned, you know, you can usually tell based on, you know, behavior and or the energetics of your dog, where their energy might be a little too high, and we're trying to balance that out a little bit. As such, then, we want to utilize foods that are going to be more neutral, but you could still utilize warming as kind of the pieces. So what I mean by that is beef, again, is a neutral food. And so that will be the mainstay of my meal here for my dogs. And so I have some ground beef. And, oh dear. Penny, what are you saying? Penny knows I got food. And she wants it. All right, so we got some ground beef here. Along with the ground beef, what I am going to be doing here is adding for my bones. Again, I'm going to be using some chicken wing in there. And so that is fine. The other thing that I am going to add is oatmeal. And so again, for those people who don't want to feed, you know, grains and oats and whatnot to their dogs, again, skip it. However, I do sometimes like to add grains and oats to my dog's meals because one, I have a dog that gets the hunger pukes. And so he needs multiple meals throughout the day. But I find if he has like some brown rice and or some oatmeal in there, it helps to alleviate those hunger pukes. And so for him, I add a little oatmeal to his dish. In this particular case, we're doing it just again based on the energetics. The other thing that we're going to add here is, again, I am going to be adding some liver. And some gizzards. And then again, I always add heart. So I am using some duck heart here. The other neutral, so if you're trying to create a more neutral meal, then as I mentioned, beef is a neutral protein, but I want to balance this out a little bit. And what I mean by balance it is I want some kind of more cooling foods and or what we would consider sweet foods. And so to counterbalance dogs that are too yang and or have too much heat, then you could use the sweet. And so I'm going to add some beets here. You could add baby carrots, which would be nice as well. And so oatmeal in itself tonifies qi, and it's actually restorative to the body. So that's very beneficial. As I mentioned, let's see here. What we're also going to be adding here is some artichoke. So I got some artichoke. And then I hate to keep using my fingers because but I don't have a spoon. There we go. Got some sweet potatoes. Now, what you could do is I like to, again, always add spices. So what I am going to do here is use some ginger root. And so ginger root is warming. It's also very good for the tummy. For if you have a dog that has any kind of tummy issues or anything of that nature. So you can add a little ginger root. Smells good. Not anything that I would particularly eat, but certainly something that my dogs would eat. And let's see if I'm missing anything. We've got the beef, we've got sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes has a little garlic that's mixed into it. And then the other thing that I'm going to add here is these little make these little supplements. I don't really call them a supplement. Basically, what it is super phyto foods, and you can get these off of our website. And so super phyto foods, this is phyto greens. And the greens are primarily, they're great for dogs that have allergies. It helps with detoxification process. So I like to take the greens and I just kind of mix it in with a, yogurt or a kefir or something, and then freeze them. And so again, this here is a meal for, again, spring. This would be a meal that is more balanced, which means we're using both neutral and sweet foods to help balance out the yang and the warming foods if it's too warm for dogs. And so the truth be told is you can take this, and so some people are very, and again, this might go against your grain, but the grain. But again, if you want to create meals that are more warming, so I might create meals that are more warming for dogs that have digestive upsets, as opposed to or diarrhea, as opposed to feeding them a raw meal. And so in those particular cases, I tend to cook the food. And so I just quickly saute it on the oven. And so what I did is, this is white chicken breast along with some carrots. And I've got in here some greens, which are the water chestnuts, along with dandelion greens. And so you could warm this up a little bit, but by warming it, it also creates the food to become warmer in itself. So it's more yang than a yin meal. So, but nevertheless, you can do it either raw and or cooked. So for those of you who prefer to cook your food, then this would be the route to go, as opposed to the raw. The other thing that I do is I will add an egg into this. I do keep the shell on. However, generally, if I'm keeping the shell on, then I do want to kind of make sure it's chopped up really nice. Kind of sprinkle that on there. And so along with that, I am going to use the herb of rosemary. And so rosemary, again, is one of those herbs that are so beneficial in a lot of different ways. I use a lot of rosemary. I like to use thyme. I like to use oregano in my dog's food just because of the nutritional benefits. But again, this would be a cooked, prepared meal that you would be able to do. Now, this does not have any bone in it. And so as such, you can use either a bone substitute like bone meal, but I tend to, in this particular meal, what I'm going to do is simply add some eggshells. And so what I do is just grind the eggshells after I've used them. Make sure you wash them really well. And so speaking about eggs, again, you could utilize whether it's a turkey or a quail or a duck egg or anything of that nature. But if you are going to be using the eggshells, you want to preferably use eggs that are local. Maybe you have somebody in the area that has ducks and chickens that you can buy some fresh, local eggs as opposed to the store-bought eggs. And the reason is because the store-bought eggs, they wash them in chemicals. And so if you're utilizing the shell in your meals, then you probably want to do something that is going to not have any kind of chemicals into it. And so again, now we've got our meal here. And so this is something that you can prepare. And again, this is cooked versus raw, which you can do either or. And then for the other treats that I would say is, let's see, again, I'm going to use these because I particularly like them. And so we're talking about balancing out the yang plate. So yang plate being all of the warming foods. But if you have a dog, again, that's excessive yang and you want to balance that out a little bit by using either neutrals. And so maybe you're not looking to prepare your dog raw food or fresh food, but maybe you're willing to do this just based on doing some treats and stuff like that. So anything is better than nothing. And so what I'm using here is some ground beef that has already been cooked. Along with it, I've got some kale and spinach that is mixed into it. And so I'm going to fill that up in there. The other thing I am going to add here is some artichoke. I like to just kind of put them on the side there. No, it's kind of a weird thing to stick in for dog treats, but again, if we're looking at based on the seasonality of it, artichokes are great for digestion. They have a lot of potassium in it. It's great for muscles and nerves. So that would be good. And then what I'm going to use for my herb here is I am going to use a little of turmeric. And so I'm just going to add a little bit of turmeric in there. And along with the turmeric, I think I am going to, let's see, add turmeric. I think we're going to go with a quail egg. And so we'll just go ahead and give that a little crack. Whoops, did you see that? Spurted. All right, so there you have a treat that you can make for your dogs. Obviously, you're not going to freeze a raw egg, and or maybe you might, but I would not. But again, a little treat that you can do then for your dog for the season of spring. So these are all some ideas that you can use as you are creating your own meals for your dogs. So again, we want to use warming foods as we're coming into the spring. And again, that is the element of wood. And again, the flavor is sour. And so the proteins are chicken and duck and pheasant and goat and buffalo. And then we can balance that with neutral foods being beef, and or you can use foods that are in the neutral and or sweet foods to help balance that, being your beets and your baby carrots and things of that nature. And so through the month, we're going to be doing mostly kind of ongoing about different types of foods that you could be adding into your dog's meals. And so I particularly am already thinking about my garden this year. And so we could talk about different vegetables that you could be growing for yourself, and then we could talk about how to store them. And you can freeze them, you can can them. Some of them just need a cool place depending on what you're going to grow, and some of the herbs and so forth. And so again, if you didn't catch the first half, that will give you a better understanding as to really what we're trying to accomplish here by sharing on how to create those meals. And so if you are on Facebook and or YouTube, if you're on YouTube, if you would give it a thumbs up, go ahead and subscribe to our channel, which will notify you every time we go live and or we post a video. So, and if you are on Facebook, give me a little thumbs up so I know that you're there and or that you have any questions. You can go ahead and put those in the comments section. With that being said, I hope this was fun. It's a little, I know it's a little kind of weird. I don't normally do a food, but I thought it would be fun. I thought it'd be fun to put some recipes together for you, just so you could kind of see how it's done, and again, get some great benefits for your dog for seasonal feeding. And so again, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Christine. I'm with a Naturally Balanced Dog, and you guys all have a great evening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.